He was known as Archie Bunker in America. However, everything changed for Carroll O'Connor in 1995 when she got a phone call. The four-time Emmy winner vanished from Hollywood overnight. All of a sudden, the biggest celebrity on television was appearing in courtrooms rather than on sets. He went straight for narcotics traffickers. In 17 states, he passed legislation. What sorrow, though, caused America's favorite father figure to permanently step away from the spotlight? You may be surprised by the response. On August 2, 1924, Carroll O'Connor was born in Manhattan. His ancestry was deeply rooted in Irish Catholicism. Edward, his father, was a lawyer. Elise, his mother, was a teacher. Out of the three sons, Carroll was the eldest. Later, in 1961, one brother, Hugh, would perish in a motorbike accident. Robert, the other, went on to work as a psychiatrist in New York. Education was a top priority for the family. Carroll's life would be shaped by that background, which was rich in Catholic culture and Irish values. It would even have an impact on the roles he performed in the future. Carroll grew up in Forest Hills, Queens, when millions of American families were destroyed by the Great Depression, a location distant from destitution. The family resided in a cozy single-family home while his father's legal firm remained successful. Large Tudor-style mansions and well-kept streets characterized the intended upper-class area known as Forest Hills. Carroll was exempt from the national unemployment rate, which had reached 25%. He was never hungry. His home was never lost. When he had to portray working-class folks years later, that familiarity stood in stark contrast to him. He lived on one side of the social divide as the rest of the nation fell apart, so he was aware of it in addition to reading about it. Carroll had a rough start to his educational career. At age 5, he entered first grade without attending kindergarten. He fell behind early because of the leap. His mind simply wasn't prepared for the demands of the classroom. He asked too many off-topic inquiries, according to the teachers. He was intelligent yet challenging to instruct. He had already been held back once by the age of 11. At Newtown High in Elmhurst, where he completed his elementary education, he performed mediocrely in literature and history, but never distinguished himself as a standout student. In addition to making him feel alienated, such hardships sharpened his observational skills, which would later help him become a superb actor. Carroll departed Queens in 1941 to attend Wake Forest University in North Carolina. He was only 17. The world he knew was completely different from the South. However, war broke out before he could establish himself. The attack on Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7, 1941. Carroll desired to be of service. Early in 1942, he submitted an application to the Naval Air Corps. However, he was sent away. He was toothless. His grades were inadequate, and 3 of his teeth were missing. It was painful to be rejected. Carroll didn't make the cut since military service was associated with manhood in those days. He didn't give up, though. Additionally, his time at the Merchant Marine Academy was brief. He became a merchant seaman in 1943 after joining the National Maritime Union. Through the North Atlantic, he sailed the Mediterranean and the Caribbean in the latter years of the conflict. Every journey was dangerous since German U-boats were still present. Carroll, however, continued. From the sea, he witnessed the fighting. He carried that sense of peril, separation, and loneliness with him. That unvarnished truth emerged later when he portrayed harsh, tired characters like Archie Bunker. Things had changed by the time he returned home in 1946. Once a well-known attorney in New York, his father was imprisoned at Sing Sing for fraud. Carroll never discussed that topic in public. The family remained silent about the controversy. They were an Irish Catholic family that had resided in a lovely mansion in Forest Hills, Queens. Of his 3 sons, Carroll was the eldest. His siblings became doctors: Robert, who went on to become a psychiatrist, and Hugh, who would eventually pass away in a 1961 motorcycle accident. Carroll may have pursued a career in law like his father. However, after the war, with his family in disarray, he began to think differently. What everyone else had, he didn't want. He accepted a position at the Irish Advocate, his family's newspaper. Since 1893, the publication had been in operation, bringing Irish Americans together for almost a century, kept his pen occupied, visited Irish activities and reported on occurrences. People recalled seeing him at those events, sometimes with his mother at his side, notepad in hand. Although it wasn't a glamorous job, it helped him stay grounded. He learned how to write and observe as well, which would help him later on when he took the stage. By the late 1940s, Carroll had taken yet another surprising step. Contrary to what some claim, he enrolled at the University of Montana, not Montana State. Although he initially did not study acting, he joined a fraternity. He met Nancy Fields there as well. She assisted with lighting, makeup, and all other backstage tasks for student productions. She was intelligent, self-assured, and drama and English-focused. They clicked. She was of Crow Indian descent and held a great regard for the past. They were wed in 1951 and remained together for the rest of their lives. They gave the institution a sizable donation years later, which aided in the construction of the Rocky Mountain West Center. In addition, Nancy devoted years to conserving a collection of almost 600 old photographs of Crow Indians from 1895 to 1920. His and her work were equally important. In 1950, they packed up once more. On this occasion, he left Montana to accompany his brother Hugh, who was traveling to Dublin for medical school. Carroll seized the opportunity to study Irish literature and history at University College Dublin. By 1952, he had graduated, but there was more to it than that. He developed a passion for theater. He performed as George Roberts on stage in Dublin, as a subdued homage to a deceased buddy. This choice followed him around Scotland and Ireland as he presented Shakespeare in little theatres, such as the renowned Gate Theatre. He was more than simply a passing actor. The 1953 Edinburgh Festival's critics were impressed. Even when he portrayed old characters, his art was said to be very contemporary. However, that name, George Roberts, was short-lived. He was ordered to discontinue it by an Irish theatre owner in 1954. The man informed Carroll that he didn't want that name associated with his business, since he had previously acted with George Roberts. Carroll relinquished it. Carroll O'Connor was suddenly reborn under his true name, which would eventually become well known. Later that year, when he returned to New York, reality struck him hard. He was revered across Europe. He couldn't even get auditions at home. Casting directors snubbed him, agencies rejected him, and he felt invisible. He began teaching at public schools, in order to make ends meet. He was a replacement in the Bronx and Queens, from 1955 until 1958. He was unknown to the students, but occasionally he would draw them in with a little Shakespeare, transforming classrooms into makeshift theaters. He also attended the University of Montana during this period, where he graduated with a master's degree in education. Shakespeare in American politics was the subject of his thesis, yet despite having a degree, his career was stagnant. He said that his teaching years had transformed him years later. He learned how to communicate with actual people from them, the same individuals who would eventually recognize certain aspects of themselves in Archie Bunker. In 1958, everything changed. It all began with a newspaper. Nancy, his wife, saw a casting call for an odd new off-Broadway production that was based on Ulysses by James Joyce. Carroll was not really interested in trying out. He was about to quit. Nancy, however, shoved him. He went, and it was successful. He was given the part of Buck Mulligan by director Burgess Meredith. Ulysses in Nighttown was an unexpected smash. For 167 nights it operated, Carroll stood out among the cast members who received high appreciation from critics. Later, actress Pauline Flanagan claimed that he added a unique element to each scene. Everything changed because of that one position. He was given a role in The Big Knife in 1959. After the show concluded, all of a sudden, he was no longer invisible. Carroll subsequently stated that Archie would not exist if it weren't for Joyce and Nancy. He was prepared for television by 1960. He made his on-screen debut on March 6 in the serious and contentious role of prosecutor Frederick Katzman in the Sacco Vanzetti narrative. It was viewed by around 27 million people when it was shown on NBC's Sunday Showcase. Carroll's performance received accolades for its intensity and nuance. He was doing more than reciting lines. He was displaying the virtues and vices of a powerful man. Offers began to flow in. He had been in 8 different TV shows by the end of 1960. He performed as a mafia enforcer in one show and a Russian diplomat in another during the same week in October. Casting directors were delighted by his versatility. A guy who could portray nearly any character. He gained notoriety as the character actor's character actor, even if his name was still unknown to most people. The films followed. From 1961 until 1970, Carroll played 34 supporting parts. He portrayed a severe judge in A Fever in the Blood, 1961, which was his first significant motion picture role. It paved the way for further significant jobs. He portrayed a wild-eyed commander who dominated every scene in Kelly's Heroes, released in 1970, Knock It Off with Those Negative Waves, and even improvised the well-known sentence. He was no longer only playing serious parts. Comedy also came easily. He starred in popular films of the decade, including Hawaii with Max von Sydow, In Harm's Way with John Wayne, and Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. He almost nearly landed 2 famous TV roles, Dr. Smith and the skipper on Gilligan's Island, in the movie Lost in Space. It didn't matter that he didn't receive either. Carroll O'Connor had transformed from an unnoticed educator to a well-known actor by 1970. Carroll O'Connor never imagined he would end up as one of the most recognizable faces on television. He portrayed a loud-mouthed racist named Archie in the 1968 pilot Justice for All. It was rejected by the network. In 1969, a second pilot arrived. Those were the times. The same outcome. In any case, O'Connor disliked the writing. He promised to rewrite it himself, according to producer Norman Lear. Lear could find another actor if he didn't like that. Nobody thought the program would last. ABC was successful. O'Connor made Europe his home. Then unexpectedly, CBS began airing it in 1970. They gave it a new name, Every Member of the Family. A call came in for O'Connor. He had returned. It debuted in January 1971. It didn't take long for ratings to pick up speed. It blew up. It rose to the top of the American charts and remained there for 5 years in a row. It was more than simply the taunts and yelling that captivated Archie Bunker. Beneath it all was the anguish. The role was given dimension by Carroll O'Connor. He wasn't only upset, he was trying to cling to a world that was disappearing, confused and afraid of change. Archie's problem, according to O'Connor, is adapting to a world that is changing before him. Because of his complexity, audiences both adored and despised him. Archie was both the man sobbing at a funeral and the one shouting obscenities. He was voted number 5 of all time by TV Guide by 1999. He topped the charts in 2005, surpassing both Lucy and Homer Simpson. The show wasn't cautious. Abortion, homosexuality, racism, the Vietnam War, menopause, and impotence were all discussed. Archie called everyone colored, mispronounced everything, and even said worse. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen on TV. Nevertheless, America observed. It was the most watched program in the nation. At the conclusion of the first season, O'Connor was more than just a fearless actor. There was a walkout by CBS technicians in 1972. The picket line was something Carroll would not cross. He halted manufacturing. "I've always been a trade union man," he remarked. "Strikebreakers are not something I can work with." He remained steady, despite the network's hysteria. Nearly 2 months passed during the strike. He returned on his own terms when everything was over. The rift between O'Connor and Norman Lear deepened that same year. They argued over directing, comedy, and screenplays. Lear, O'Connor believed, doubted his sincerity. Lear believed that O'Connor was never content. The identical complaint opened each script reading, "It simply isn't effective." He was correct at times. There were moments when there was fear, yet the tension led to creativity. They welcomed O'Connor back even after he left the program in season 5, missing 3 episodes. They were forced to. Without him, the program would not be able to continue. Carroll O'Connor made a daring demand in 1977. No more recording like a play or live audiences. He desired a movie. He desired authority. He clarified that working with film results in 80% less strain. Although it was a significant shift, the producers gave in. Now that he had so much authority, he was among the most respected performers of his era. He won Best Actor in a Comedy Series at the 30th Annual Emmy Awards in 1979, earning him his 4th Emmy. He defeated well-known players including Henry Winkler, John Ritter, Hal Linden, and Alan Alda. "This win only happened because of my past wins," O'Connor remarked modestly during his acceptance speech. "The reason for this Emmy is all those other Emmys, without which I couldn't win this one," he said. Even more unexpected is the fact that O'Connor first believed the program would fail. He requested a return ticket to Rome in his contract, since he was so certain it would fail, and intended to travel to Italy when it was terminated. Rather, for 5 consecutive years, All in the Family was the most popular show in America, and O'Connor was eternally renowned for his performance as Archie Bunker. The distinction between performer and character became increasingly hazy as the years went by. Archie was nothing like Carroll O'Connor. He was a liberal, a writer, and a teacher, but people couldn't tell them apart. "Hey Archie," yelled strangers on the street. His photo appeared in CBS advertisements, but his true identity was omitted. It affected him. He said that the public was starting to forget Carroll O'Connor. He never detested the persona though. If he met him, he added, he would probably like him. All he could do was feel terrible for him. There was one last indication that Lear and O'Connor were at peace. Lear once sent him a letter following all of the arguments and artistic difficulties. The sole item on O'Connor's desk when someone paid him a visit years later was that letter. That mail, no scripts, no awards. Evidence that even the most difficult relationships can terminate amicably. Carroll O'Connor was devastated in 1961 and never recovered. On a wet road, his younger brother Hugh had perished in a motorbike accident. Carroll's acting career was just about to take off when the agony became irreversible. To preserve his brother's name, Carroll and his wife called their adoptive son Hugh when they adopted him in Rome in 1962. This was a friendship, not only an homage. During the All in the Family filming, Carroll even stored his brother's medical textbooks and old leather jacket in his dressing area. Carroll and his wife brought that adoptive son Hugh O'Connor home when he was just 6 days old. In the midst of pandemonium with celebrities like Elizabeth Taylor, Carroll was working on the movie Cleopatra in Rome at the time. Nothing, however, came close to the moment he held his son. After years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive, this moment was a turning point. To spend more time with his son, he took a 3-day break from filming. It was the beginning of something both tragic and lovely. By Hugh's 16th birthday, everything had altered once more. Hodgkin's lymphoma was the diagnosis made for him. The care was cruel. 2 operations and 28 cycles of chemotherapy. The agony was excruciating. He was prescribed strong medications by doctors, and in order to cope with his sickness, he finally began smoking marijuana. The first indication of concern was that prescriptions weren't all that was needed soon. Hugh began taking cocaine by the age of 18. Over the course of 10 years, Carroll attempted 8 different rehabs, but nothing helped. It didn't help that Hugh was cast in his TV program in the middle of the night, and that the production was moved to Georgia. Even on the set, drugs were prevalent. Carroll experienced his own health crisis while battling to rescue his son. He went in for a standard examination in 1989. His heart was discovered to be in poor condition by the doctors. He had emergency heart bypass surgery the next day. Then things became complicated. 10 days after his gallbladder flared up, he had another operation. He gave up smoking 2 packs a day, recovered for weeks, and emerged from the experience leaner, but more determined. Hugh maintained his sobriety during this period, in order to help his father. However, it was short-lived. In 1998, Carroll would require surgery once more to avoid having a stroke. Carroll watched out for others even while his own world fell apart. Carroll took extra care to shield his co-star Howard Rollins, who was also struggling with addiction. He even paid out of pocket for a helpline for struggling actors and staff, and he pushed the studio to provide on-site therapy. Carroll battled to keep Rollins on the program when he skipped work. Since he was experiencing addiction with his kid, he was aware that it was not about willpower. Reimagined himself on film in 1988. He changed his name from Archie Bunker to Bill Gillespie, the police chief, a Southern cop in a community where racial tensions were high. Carroll was given the opportunity to play a man who may change and pursue a second profession. Gillespie was far from flawless. He was slow to change, harsh, and defective. He did, however, change. The character was developed over the course of 8 seasons and 147 episodes to become capable of facing prejudice and injustice. In the background, he also constructed something. Carroll returned stronger following his procedures. He became the show's executive producer, authored 20 episodes, edited over 50, and directed 4. He even penned some of the episodes' lyrics. He was now in charge of everything, not just acting. Worked livers to persuade CBS to take up the show after NBC dropped it. It was successful. Nothing ever halted the tempest that was building at home, even if the performance continued for years. For his kid, Carroll had developed the character of Officer Lonnie Jameson. He believed that giving Hugh a steady employment would aid in his recovery. On the episode, Hugh's role evolved from patrol officer to acting chief, but Hugh was still having trouble off camera. Carroll O'Connor took up the phone on March 28, 1995, soon after 1:30 in the afternoon. Hugh, his 32-year-old son, was on the other end. The day ought to have been joyful. Hugh's voice wasn't happy, even though he and his wife were celebrating their wedding anniversary. It weighed much. Then the words that broke Carroll's heart spilled out. "No, I believe I will cap myself today." Carroll stopped. Then he pleaded, "Why do you say those things, Hugh? Would you mind if I came to pick you up?" Hugh, however, had made up his mind. "No, Pops, you must leave. Goodbye." Carroll continued to hear that farewell even after the line died. He repeatedly phoned back. However, nobody answered. Panic gave way to terror as the minutes passed slowly. Carroll contacted the Los Angeles police by 2 p.m. He informed them that his suicidal son had firearms in the house. Time was running out. The cops were on the move. Hugh's home on Hillside, close to the seaside, was encircled by a SWAT squad. They attempted to contact him for 3.5 hours. A single gunshot reverberated from within just before 4 p.m. Officers arrived, but it was already too late. Hugh had left. According to Carroll, the cops arrived barely in time to hear the bullet that killed him. Since he was 16, Hugh had been having difficulties. Drugs had kept him in a chokehold for half of his life. He was adopted by Carroll when she was filming Cleopatra in Rome. Hugh had plenty of opportunities, affection, and a spot on his father's television program, In the Heat of the Night. However, none of it was sufficient. Hugh had spent 3 years in treatment. Despite his best efforts, the addiction returned stronger each time. He was paranoid, delusional, and certain that others were listening through the walls in his last days. Hugh was unable to accept Carroll's suggestion of another stay in treatment. He was exhausted. He gave up as a result. Carroll appeared before reporters outside his son's home the same evening. His face was blank with agony, and his eyes were hollow. He had the option to remain silent, but instead he spoke. He revealed to the public what had happened to his kid, as a result of drugs. Carroll claimed that while he was attractive, intelligent, and humorous, he was unable to get rid of the monkey on his back. The speech wasn't prepared. It was the truth from a devastated father. In addition to being a warning and a message to all parents, the pain was unfiltered. Then he named Harry Persigin, the guy he thought had contributed to the demise of his son. He was referred to as a companion in murder by Carroll. Carroll had reported Persigin to the police 5 days before to Hugh's death, claiming that he continued to deliver narcotics to Hugh's home. Following Carroll's public declaration, police searched Persigin's residence and discovered $1,700 in cash, cocaine, and paraphernalia. That same evening, he was taken into custody. He later received a 1-year jail sentence in 1996 for providing Hugh with cocaine. He didn't stop there though. Persigin claimed Carroll's life was destroyed and filed a slander lawsuit against him in 1997. He requested $10 million. Carroll refused to give up. He praised the case and said it will raise awareness of the problem. Just for the publicity, I'll sue him up the bazoo, he declared. It was an emotional trial. Angela Hughes' widow, testified. Carroll did the same. The jurors paid attention. They then reached a unanimous decision in Carroll's favor. I would have done what he did, one jury stated. Or worse, Persignon was referred to be a murder accomplice by another. I knew a jury would back me up, he remarked, when the verdict was announced. And you did. He didn't, however, end there. Carroll took action because he was in agony. He joined the Partnership for a Drug-Free America as a national spokesperson. He addressed parents directly. He said, "This is Hugh," as he gazed into the camera. "My son is this. I detested it when he began doing drugs at the age of 16. In a different address, he called on politicians to target drug dealers rather than merely consumers. "We need to cut down on the number of people that people have to turn away," he stated. People listened to his voice, which was heavy with sadness. In 1997, partly because to Carroll's encouragement, the Hugh O'Connor Memorial Law, often known as the Drug Dealers Civil Liability Act, was approved in California. It permitted relatives of victims to file civil lawsuits against drug traffickers. As it went by, Carroll stood by politicians. He described it as a method of striking somebody in the pocket. That law was not limited to California. It was adopted in 17 additional states. It turned into his enduring legacy, not only as a performer, but also as a distraught parent, who wouldn't keep quiet. Carroll stated something straightforward in an interview with Larry King that was quite sharp. "I can't go a day without thinking about him." He never wanted to move on from it. He subsequently acknowledged that nothing would bring him peace, but he discovered meaning. The jury indicated, "I may go after these guys after the litigation, so I will," he said. He fought against what murdered Hugh for the remainder of his life: silence, dealers, drugs. Carroll, however, was a complex individual. He started restoring vintage cars at Newbury Park in 1996. He had once told Hugh about the dream. He invested almost $100,000 in it. He worked with a group of skilled restorers and made weekly visits. A jet black 1938 Delage, constructed for the 1939 New York World's Fair, was one of his favorite vehicles. He responded, "I believe you would have enjoyed this area. It would be fun for him." It was more than simply a store. It was a memorial and a means of preserving his son's memory. Another significant contribution was made by Carroll and his wife, Nancy. They gave the University of Montana a $1 million donation. The funds were used to establish a study center at his alma college, which grew to become a significant resource for local history and development. The Carroll and Nancy Fields O'Connor Center for the Rocky Mountain West is the name given by the school. It was more than simply a structure. It was a legacy that allowed their names and hues to endure in culture and education. Carroll returned to teach at the same university in his latter years. Writing the movie was the name of the course. He was adored by the students. He didn't use a textbook to teach. Throughout his career in Hollywood, he taught executive producing, Broadway, and Archie Bunker. He created the atmosphere of a true writer's room in his class. He discussed lessons he had learned from both pain and triumph, offered candid criticism, and related anecdotes. He continued to turn up in spite of health issues, which included surgery and even the loss of a toe. Because education was important, it was important to pass it on. Carroll's final film role was in Return to Me 2000, a drama about love and loss in which he portrayed a kind elderly grandpa. It was intimate. It was heartfelt, straightforward, and silent. His health deteriorated in the same year: circulation problems, diabetes, and surgery. Although it was evident that he was suffering, he continued to work and advance. Then Carroll O'Connor passed out at home on June 21, 2001. An hour later, he passed away from a heart attack. His age was 76. Legends Rob Reiner, Sally Struthers, Martin Sheen, and others who had adored him both on and off screen attended his burial. A cenotaph honoring Hugh's father and son together is affixed to his headstone. In his honor, TV Land broadcast a family-friendly marathon. Until her passing in 2014, his wife Nancy continued their legacy. Carroll's actual memorial, however, isn't seen. It is in the lives he attempted to safeguard. He assisted in passing laws, in the parents who now raise their voices, in the note that he left, "Keep your children away from drugs."